Welcome to Pulp Mortem, the search for a lost literary classic from the Pulp era. My name is Jake, and my weather knee is starting to ache, so get your umbrellas and Gore-Tex, because there's a storm. Before we get to that, a little bit about the author. Paul Tabori was a Hungarian-born author born May 8, 1908, and died in 1974 at the age of 65. His father was a journalist and was murdered in Auschwitz in 1944, but he was able to escape the Nazis with his mother and younger brother, author and actor George Tabori. Paul Tabori studied in Vienna, Berlin, and Budapest, and he earned his PhD in psychology. Tabori's literary career was diverse and extensive, and he dipped his toes in a multitude of genres. In addition to writing science fiction, he tackled nonfiction, history, erotica, crime, social commentary, and more. Before his writing career, Tabori followed in his father's footsteps as a journalist and was also a playwright, psychoanalyst, screenwriter, and producer with over 30 theatrical features and more than 100 television films. And you thought you were busy. He occasionally took on the pen names Peter Stafford and Christopher Stevens. Tabori is remembered for his wit, psychological insights, and his ability to make complex subjects accessible to the general audience. Now you might be saying to yourself, hey, wait a second, those two don't look like the same guy. You're right, they're not.
That man's an imposter. That man is the imposter.
I don't really go off of what Wikipedia says per se. I'll go off of like more reliable websites and like my reference books. But even then, sometimes I get differing images of authors. Whenever there's a question if this is the real person, I'll usually go off of the majority. Let's say I have 2 of my reference books and 3 websites have a picture of this guy, but 1 website has a picture of this guy. I'll go with the majority. But even this isn't foolproof because for an example, Keith Roberts, who wrote Pavane and the Furies, a majority of the websites say that this is Keith Roberts. Now, this is Keith Roberts, an author, but he's not the author that wrote The Furies. That's this guy. And I only really discovered that by doing a deep dive. It's obviously an imperfect science, and I'm not a journalist. I'm just a dork with a mild case of gigantism trying my best in front of my computer. But this is actually a first for me, because I am still unable to tell you for certain which man is the real Paul Tabori that wrote this book. According to the whole World Wide Web, these two are the same guy.
I'm Paul Tabori.
I'm Paul Tabori.
I'm Paul Tabori.
I'm
Paul Tabori.
I'm
Paul Tabori.
I'm Paul Tabori.
Now, one of 2 things has probably happened here. These guys are both named Paul Tabori, and over time the internet has just assumed that this guy is the author, and that therefore it's kind of got all jumbled together. But I have another theory. My theory is that one of these men is the journalist, psychoanalyst, and author, and the other is the screenwriter and the producer. Since the screenwriter, these are all like Hollywood American-made films that he made, whereas the writer, the psychoanalyst, he is a Hungarian-born British citizen. So that's my theory, that the internet has just taken these 2 men, both named Paul Tabori, and just melded them together into one. But which one wrote this book? I don't know. I really don't. I'm leaning slightly towards this guy only because I think he looks slightly more like his brother, but then even then I don't. Gun to my head, I don't know. Which brings us neatly to the Green Rain. No little green men, but an awful lot of full-size bright green men, women, and children. About half of Earth's population, in fact, and that was a result of the Green Rain. And the consequences mingled laughter with horror and the emergence of crackpot cults to something tragically new in race violence. And then came the second Green Rain, the really serious one. The Green Rain was an original novel and was printed by Pyramid Books in 1961 for 35 cents. I own the 4th edition, which was printed in 1969 for 60 cents. The cover is by John Schoenherr. Bleak tone, kind of pulpy. I like it though. It's got a bunch of people on the yellow brick road. It's pretty cool, I think. The full cover has for some reason been shrunk in my edition, and if you've watched any of my book hauls, you know what a big fan I am of Pyramid's cover design during this era. I'm not. And you can easily find any edition for under $10. It's a normal sized water bottle. Breakthrough! The hypothetical compound, chlorophyllogene, has been created. The theory is that this compound will create vegetation in desolate conditions, and so scientists set their sights on the moon. They believe that this hardy vegetation will eventually create an atmosphere on the moon, because that's how that works.
Don't think about it!
And a rocket filled with chlorophyllogene sets off, but something goes wrong. It sputters and falls back to Earth and explodes in the atmosphere, smearing it with these strange alien particles. Soon after, it rains.
Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my...
And anyone caught in this rain turns emerald green, about a third of the world's population. That's a lot of people in the rain. Havoc and disarray soon become the norm. Cults spring up. Ethno-states are plunged into chaos. Wars rage on, and in a solution, a plot to turn the whole world green is hatched. But that may have unforeseen consequences. Let's talk about what I liked. People are green. This in and of itself is pretty funny, but Tabori played it completely straight and serious, and to my surprise, it actually worked. The second green rain sequence is my favorite part of the book. I won't spoil it for you, but I mean, you could probably guess what happens, and there's obviously some hints on the cover. But some of the effects and the tonal shift that happens was handled really well. I wish we spent more time on that. The themes. Green Rain was recommended to me by Dominic Smith, and he said, my first request is The Green Rain by Paul Tabori. I will avoid spoilers, of course, but what I will say is that as soon as you look at it, the cover just screams pulp science fiction in the very best way possible. And that, in my opinion, the depth to which the author explores the central concept of the story puts to shame many modern writers who, in my view, seem to explore such ideas in a very shallow way. I agree with Dominic's assessment wholeheartedly. The message here is clear without being overly preachy. Tabori started to get a little heavy-handed on a couple instances, but he was able to pull back at the nick of time. In the context of Tabori's past, however, what I initially saw as kind of being a little on the nose, I soon viewed as restraint. This book deals with his experiences with the Holocaust, and it is a cautionary tale about the dangers of racism, segregation, and extreme ethnocentricities. The world's corporate, political, military, and scientific systems are all on blast here, and nobody is spared. The end. There are several end sequences here, and one of them is fantastic. The writing was moving, it was poignant, it was the perfect ending. Unfortunately, it didn't end there. I really wish it would have for reasons that will become clear later. And now, the bad.
Tut tut, it looks like rain.
The narrator. We aren't told who this is, but the story will switch from a first person to a third person to kind of a far-off commentary style viewpoint. Now, I've said before that I'm not the biggest fan of authors kind of getting in the way of their story. I think they should strive to become invisible so that the reader can become fully immersed in the thing that actually matters, which is the story. Now, granted, this isn't a hard and fast rule. It doesn't apply across the board. It's just how I like my story-driven science fiction. And sure, there are characters and names on every page, but the main character is Paul Tabori.
Tut tut.
Speaking of which, inconsistent styles. I think all the issues I have here in the bad section all stem from this core issue. This book reads like it was written by a journalist, because it was. It often reads like a news article. Like, we'll have a chapter with like characterization and story and drama, and then the very next chapter is like a page in a newspaper. Let me give you an example. But do the wicked flourish unabated? Is there no sign yet of the Marines coming to the rescue, the Bengal Lancers riding to save the beleaguered garrison, the U.S. Cavalry dashing over the pass to put the Indians to flight? Who is to foil the knaves who plot a green tyranny? Is there no wisdom, no virtue left in the world? It created this yo-yo effect, which made immersion very difficult, and there were entire sections of this book where I had to just put my head down and plow through.
It looks like rain.
The scope. You know those opening scenes in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? The good creepy one, not the bad creepy one. And not the one that's just made for some randy moms. Oh, Timothy! Those opening news shots, which kind of bounced around the whole world, they bored me as a kid. I was like, let's just get to the factory and the candy. But as an adult, those are some of my favorite parts of the movie. That being said, I can't imagine watching an entire movie of that. Tabori wanted to show us the global impact of these events, which is a grand idea, but unfortunately it reduces the story to a slog. This story can barely move because we are constantly reading about other events in far-off countries that have no bearing on the story whatsoever. Now, I've already referenced the Furies today, but that's a great example of a global cataclysm that's contained in a small geographical location. Pages upon pages are dedicated to uprisings in Africa and volatile events across the world, but every chapter across the globe is a chapter away from the main story.
And leave those umbrellas at home, all right?
There is an entire chapter, chapter 7, which is entirely dedicated to the color green. This chapter almost made me quit the whole book. It is so odd and bizarre, and any explanation I give you here simply won't do it justice. Many writers have distinct descriptive tendencies, and Tabori is no exception. It doesn't matter who we're meeting, who the character is, you better believe we're going to hear about their nose. Even if it's just a normal-looking nose, he'll say their nose looked normal. But when you grew up next to this beak, who can blame you? PG-13 warning. Cover your ears, kids! I'm going to read you an excerpt from this book. There's a scene with a man and a woman reclining beside a pool, and the man begins to oogle the lady. She stretched herself on her back, her firm, shapely breasts forming a delightful twin peak, her armpits showing a tender growth of amethyst fluff.
Gross.
All right, the fun is over, and I have to talk about the ending. Go ahead and skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear a spoiler. You don't want a spoiler? Skip ahead to here. Are you ready? At the very end, the narrator is revealed, and it is revealed that this whole story has been a dream. The "it was all a dream" trope might be the tropiest of tropes, but I don't necessarily have a problem with it. Like, just because it's a trope doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Tropes are there for a reason. Tropes are tropes because they work. My issue's not with the trope. My issue was that this story couldn't possibly have been a dream. Requirement for a dream story is that you have to stay with a central character. One person is having the dream. They work best in first person. They can probably work in third person, but again, then you have to stay with that person.
It just makes common sense.
Like, you can't simultaneously dream about corporate espionage in America, political assassination in Asia, this violent uprising in the African bush, and then interpersonal drama between two scientists working on a cure. It just doesn't work like that. That's what I meant earlier when I said I wish the story would have just ended early. Now, I know why Tabori did this. To him, I think this was the prestige moment where he reveals the parallels between this science fiction world and the real world we're facing. Here, I'll show you. The last line, "And my terror and my tears were because I did not know if the dream or waking was reality, and of the two, which was evil and which was good." Now, to be clear, that's a great line. That's poignant. It's good. It actually reminds me of like some of the great Twilight Zone episodes or something like that. However, I don't think we needed that. We got it. We understood the story. This is Tabori stepping in front of the screen before the credits roll and saying, "Did you all understand that?" And we're all like, yeah, it was good. And he goes, "Okay. Well, let me explain it to you anyways." Now, your mileage on this may vary. Maybe it doesn't bother you like it bothers me. Maybe I just don't like being treated like I'm stupid. And maybe that's not what he's doing, but I don't know. It's probably an insecurity or something. Can we talk about it? Probably something I should bring up on the internet. So what's the verdict? Personal collection, I think. I might need to come up with another category because I'm happy that I read this, but I don't know if I want to own it. The message is great, and it could have been powerful, but the clunky ending and the overload of news article-style chapters just kind of hamstrung this from being great. It's frustrating to me because with a few minor tweaks, this could have been exceptional.
Thanks for the tip.
And that's my review of The Green Rain. Special thanks to Dominic for recommending it, and yeah, keep the recommendations coming, everybody. I greatly appreciate those. As always, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time with The Radio Beasts.
I could go on all day